1. Hook. When the numbers became real in late 1944, German officers on the Western Front began reporting something that had nothing to do with tanks, tactics, or brilliant generals. They wrote about traffic. Hour after hour, columns of American trucks rolled east from the Normandy beaches, and the Channel ports lived drab vehicles nose-to, throwing dust over shattered French roads. Each truck carried fuel, shells, rations, spare parts. Behind them came more trucks and more. One German officer later described the Allied supply columns as a never-ending river. Those convoys were part of the Red Ball Express, an emergency logistics system that at its peak used about 6,000 trucks and delivered roughly 12,500 tons of supplies per day, over 412,000 tons in just 82 days. Amusing planet +1 for German commanders who had grown up in a culture that worshipped elite units and brilliant maneuver. This was the moment something clicked. The war was no longer decided by the best division on the battlefield, but by the side that could keep tens of thousands of trucks moving without stopping. They were discovering the real United States. 2. How Berlin misread America. To understand why this realization was so shocking, we have to look at how Nazi Germany saw America before and during the early years of the war. Hitler and many in the Nazi leadership built their worldview on a mix of racism, social Darwinism, and nostalgia for 19th century great power politics. In that worldview, the United States was powerful but fundamentally decadent. A mongrel nation ruled by capitalists and Jews, rich but soft and divided. Research Gay, +1 in 1940. As war raged in Europe, Hitler famously sneered, "What is America but beauty queens? Millionaires, stupid records, and Hollywood." Business Insider, +1. German officers also tended to read the U.S. experience in World War I as proof that Americans were late, clumsy, and heavily dependent on their allies. In their eyes, American troops had only arrived in 1917, fought briefly, and then gone home without suffering the long years of trench warfare that had scarred Europe. So, when they studied the U.S. between the wars, they saw a small peacetime army, a society obsessed with consumerism and entertainment, a political system that seemed isolationist and divided. On paper, they knew American industry was large, but they believed that a soft democracy could not transform that potential into sustained, disciplined war production, especially under bombing and casualties. In short, they acknowledged America's wealth, but not its ability to weaponize that wealth. 3. Roosevelt's bet, the arsenal of democracy across the Atlantic. President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw something very different. In May 1940, as France was collapsing under German attack, Roosevelt told Congress he wanted the United States to be able to produce 50,000 aircraft per year, a figure that sounded insane to many military professionals at the time. His glow +1, even some American officers doubted it. German leaders, especially Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring and Hitler himself, simply dismissed it as propaganda. They looked at America's tiny pre-war Army Air Corps and concluded it was impossible. The problem, from Berlin's point of view, was that they were judging America through 1914 to 1989's. Slow mobilization, small expeditionary force, no willingness for massive sacrifice. Roosevelt, by contrast, was betting on something new. The mass production techniques pioneered by Henry Ford in the auto industry, the capacity of millions of workers, many of them women and minorities too, be trained at speed. The flexibility of a market economy that could convert car plants into tank and bomber plants in months, not years. His glow, he called it the arsenal of democracy. Nazi leaders called it a joke. 4. The sleeping giant wakes. The numbers that followed are the heart of the story. According to wartime economic studies, between 1939 and 1944, the United States spent about $106 billion in 1944, prices on munitions, almost double Germany's $53 billion. Wikipedia, by 1945. American factories had produced roughly 286,000 aircraft, 86,000 tanks, 2.5 million trucks, 8,800 naval vessels, and 5,600 merchant ships, 41 billion rounds of ammunition, all while also supplying vast quantities of equipment to Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and other allies. The Washington Post. And this was achieved after starting from a position where, in the U.S. Army was smaller than those of many European countries, and the shipbuilding industry was launching only a handful of vessels each month. The Washington Post. In other words, America didn't just have industrial capacity, it proved it could rewire the entire economy for war, faster than any dictatorship had imagined. Even Hitler had to privately acknowledge this. In February 1942, just 2 months after declaring war on the U.S., he reluctantly praised America's great industrial achievements, admitting its superiority in mass production and transportation, especially in the automobile sector. ResearchGate. But by then, German strategy was already locked into a war against the Soviet Union, and the British Empire as well. The machine it had mocked was now fully awake. Five. Combat shock, meeting the new America on the battlefield. German troops had mixed impressions of American soldiers. Early clashes in North Africa highlighted U.S. inexperience, but also revealed strengths German planners had underestimated. Artillery. American doctrine relied heavily on flexible artillery fire. Later assessments from Allied and German sides agreed on the speed, accuracy, and devastating power of American artillery, which inspired confidence in U.S. troops and fear and respect in enemies. Govinfo Mobility's U.S. units were lavishly equipped with trucks, jeeps, and half-tracks, allowing rapid redeployment. Air power. As an American bomber and fighter forces grew, Germany faced a relentless daylight bombing campaign that tore into its fuel supplies, factories, and transport network. Air University +1 German frontline soldiers often commented on American material abundance, fresh equipment, plentiful ammunition, and a staggering number of vehicles. Over time, many came to respect U.S. troops as determined and brave enemies, even if Nazi propaganda never admitted it. American heritage, but the true shock came not from an individual battle, but from the way Americans sustained battle day after day, front after front. 6. Normandy. When logistics became destiny, the D-Day landings on the 6th of June 1944 were already the largest amphibious operation in history. But what followed impressed professional soldiers even more. The Allies' ability to keep reinforcing and supplying the bridgehead. By June's end, the Western Allies had put hundreds of thousands of troops ashore in Normandy, along with tanks, artillery, fuel, and engineering equipment. Complex deception operations and airborne landings allowed them to secure key bridges and road junctions, while resistance attacks and air power slowed German reinforcements. NDU press yet, even this was only the visible tip of the iceberg. Behind the beaches lay artificial mulberry harbors handling cargo until real ports could be opened. A growing web of depots, pipelines, and airfields. An entire continent spanning industrial base focused on one question: how do we keep this going indefinitely? Meanwhile, German armored divisions struggled to reach Normandy at all. Blown rail bridges, fuel shortages, and Allied air attacks turned relatively short movements into multi-day odysseys. One SS Panzer division took 17 days to cover a distance that should have taken 3. For German planners, the contrast was brutal. Their own army had been built to win short, decisive campaigns. The Allied army was built to fight forever, as long as factories in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo kept running. Hisklo 7. The Red Ball Express, the river of trucks after the breakout from Normandy in August 1944. The Allied advance was so rapid that traditional supply methods couldn't keep up. Railways were wrecked, ports were limited, and armored spearheads were racing across France. The American answer was the Red Ball Express. Planners designated special one-way truck routes from the Normandy depots to forward supply areas. At its peak, about 6,000 vehicles were in constant motion. Convoys delivered roughly 12,500 tons of supplies per day. Over 82 days, they moved more than 412,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, and equipment. Amusing Planet +2, Crocopedia +2. Most of the drivers were African-American soldiers, many with little previous trucking experience, driving day and night under blackout conditions and the threat of mines, ambushes, and accidents. Amusing Planet. For German observers, this looked insane. A logistics system so lavish and improvised that it burned enormous amounts of fuel just to move fuel forward, but it worked. Heat kept Batanes and other armies moving at a tempo the Wehrmacht could no longer match. This is the visual moment many historians point to when they talk about Germany realizing that American power was built different. A war run not just by divisions and generals, but by mechanics, drivers, dispatchers, and factory workers thousands of kilometers away. 8. Speer's memo. Admitting the contest was lost. Inside the Third Reich, no one understood this better than Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production. In 1944, Speer described the war to Hitler as a contest between two systems of organization. Germany as rigid, tradition-bound, perfectionist system versus the Allied, especially American, system rooted in mass production and improvisation. Germany focused on fewer, highly sophisticated weapons produced in limited quantities. The United States focused on standardized designs, built in staggering numbers, and supported by flexible logistics. By mid-1944, Allied bombing of fuel and transport networks, combined with U.S. and British industrial output, meant that even Speer's impressive armaments increases could no longer compensate for losses at the front. In this sense, the moment Germany realized the truth was not a single day, but a recognition spreading through reports, memos, and battlefield experience. Hitler's mocking question about beauty queens in Hollywood had aged horribly. The shopkeeper nation had built the most powerful industrial war machine in history. The war had turned into a long-range competition of factories, refineries, shipyards, and truck convoys, and in that competition, Germany was hopelessly outmatched. 9. What the story really shows. For a modern audience, the story of Germany's misreading of America isn't just about national pride. It's a textbook example of what happens when ideology blinds leaders to data. German racism led them to underestimate a diverse democracy. Faith in willpower and tradition led them to ignore assembly lines, logistics, and economic planning. They judged their enemy by how it looked in peacetime, not by what it could become in a crisis. The United States, for all its flaws, proved capable of reorganizing an entire society around a strategic goal and doing it faster and more flexibly than a dictatorship that claimed to be the ultimate war state. That is the real meaning behind the